Everyone told me I was the perfect mother. They were wrong. And my son David proved it on December 23rd with 7 words that changed everything. My name is Margaret Thompson, and for 67 years, I believed that love meant sacrifice, that being a good mother meant giving until there was nothing left to give. I learned that lesson the hard way when my husband Robert died 15 years ago, leaving me with a 12-year-old son and a mountain of medical debt that threatened to swallow us whole. But I didn't break. I couldn't break. David needed me. I remember those early days after the funeral, sitting at our kitchen table with bills spread out like fallen leaves, each one stamped with red ink that might as well have been blood. The house payment, David's school expenses, the remaining hospital bills that insurance wouldn't touch. I had 2 choices, give up or fight harder than I'd ever fought in my life. I chose to fight. Within a month, I was working double shifts at the hospital where I'd been a nurse for 20 years. Days in the cardiac unit, nights in the emergency room. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. But David's future was worth every sacrifice. When he needed new clothes for high school, I picked up weekend shifts. When he wanted to join the baseball team, I sold my grandmother's jewelry to pay for equipment and travel fees. "Mom, you don't have to do all this," David would say sometimes, catching me hunched over the calculator at 2 a.m, trying to make numbers work that simply wouldn't cooperate. "Honey, this is what mothers do," I'd tell him, ruffling his hair. "We make sure our children have everything they need to succeed." And succeed he did. David graduated valedictorian, earned a full scholarship to State University for his undergraduate degree, then got into law school. But scholarships don't cover everything, and law school was expensive. So I refinanced the house, took out a second mortgage, worked overtime until my feet bled in my nursing shoes and my back screamed for mercy. It's an investment in our future, I told myself, signing papers that put my home at risk. David will be a lawyer. He'll take care of me when I'm old. When David graduated law school, I was there in the front row, tears streaming down my face as he walked across that stage. All those years of 16-hour days, of choosing between paying the electric bill or buying groceries, of wearing the same winter coat for 8 years, it had all been worth it. My son was going to be somebody. That's when he met Sarah. Sarah was beautiful, ambitious, and came from the kind of family that made our little 2-bedroom house look like a shed. Her father owned 3 car dealerships. Her mother ran a successful interior design business, and they lived in a mansion that could have fit our entire house in their foyer. When David brought her home for the first time, I saw something change in his eyes, a kind of embarrassment that cut me deeper than any physical pain I'd ever experienced. "Mom, maybe we should eat in the dining room tonight," he whispered, as Sarah admired our modest living room with its secondhand furniture and faded family photos. But I smiled and served my homemade pot roast with pride, because this was my home, built with love and sacrifice, even if it couldn't compete with Sarah's family estate. The wedding planning was where I first felt the shift. Sarah's mother, Helen, took charge of everything: the venue, the flowers, the catering. When I offered to help, offering to contribute what I could from my savings, Helen smiled that polite smile wealthy people reserve for the less fortunate. "Oh, Margaret, you've done so much already," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Let us handle the big expenses. Maybe you could make your famous dinner rolls for the rehearsal dinner." Dinner rolls. After paying for David's education, after sacrificing everything, I was relegated to dinner rolls. But I swallowed my pride because David was happy, and his happiness had always been my priority. I took out a small loan and paid for the flowers anyway, because I wanted to contribute something meaningful to my son's wedding day. I never told David about the loan. I never told him about a lot of things. After the wedding, they moved into a starter home, a beautiful 3-bedroom colonial in the suburbs that cost more than I'd made in 5 years. "Mom, we're really stretching financially with this mortgage," David confided in me one evening over dinner. "Sarah's not working yet, and my starting salary at the firm." "How much do you need?" I asked without hesitation. "Oh, Mom, I couldn't ask you to." "David, how much?" That's how I became the co-signer on their mortgage, how my name ended up on the deed, how I started making their monthly payments of $2,400. Because it's just temporary, Mom, until Sarah finds the right position and I make partner. Temporary turned into 3 years. When Sarah got pregnant with little Emma, I was over the moon. Finally, a grandchild to spoil, a little girl who would carry on our family traditions. I took early retirement, cashing in my pension early and paying the penalties, so I could help with childcare. "Daycare is so expensive," Sarah explained, "and we just don't trust strangers with our baby." So I became the live-in babysitter, watching Emma while Sarah went to yoga classes and lunch dates with her friends, while David worked 70-hour weeks trying to climb the corporate ladder. I didn't mind. Emma was a joy, with David's eyes and my stubborn chin. I rocked her to sleep, changed thousands of diapers, taught her to walk, watched her say her first words. "Gamma," she called me, because Grandma was too hard for her little tongue. I was Gamma, the woman who appeared whenever Emma needed something, who disappeared into the background whenever Sarah's friends came over, who was always available but somehow never quite part of the family photos that mattered. For 5 years, this was our rhythm. I paid the mortgage, helped with utilities when money was tight, bought Emma's clothes and toys, cooked family dinners every Sunday. I told myself this was what family meant: sacrifice, support, unconditional love. But something was changing in David. The boy who used to call me every day began calling once a week, then once a month. The man who used to hug me tight and thank me for everything I'd done started treating my contributions like they were expected, inevitable, something he was owed rather than something he should be grateful for. Mom's helping out became Mom's taking care of it, which somehow became Mom always handles that stuff. Sarah grew more distant too. She stopped inviting me to family events, stopped including me in decisions about Emma's schooling or activities. I was good enough to babysit and pay bills, but not good enough to have opinions about the child I was helping to raise. The breaking point should have come sooner, but I kept making excuses. They're busy. They're stressed. Young families have so much pressure these days. I told myself that love meant being understanding, being flexible, being invisible when necessary. I told myself that until December 23rd, when my phone rang at 3:47 in the afternoon. "Hi, honey," I said, answering on the second ring because I always answered David's calls immediately. "I was just going through Grandma's old recipes for Christmas dinner. Should I make the crown roast this year, or do you think Emma would prefer ham?" There was a pause. A long pause that should have warned me what was coming. "Mom," David said, his voice carrying that tone I'd learned to recognize, the one he used when he had to deliver bad news to clients. Professional, distant. "We need to talk about Christmas." "Of course, sweetheart. What time should I expect you? I thought we could do presents in the morning like always, then dinner around 2. Sarah's parents are welcome too, of course. I can make extra." "Mom, stop." The words hit me like a physical blow. "We're not expecting you this year." The world tilted sideways. "I'm sorry, what?" "Sarah's family is coming to our house this year. We're hosting. We decided we want to start our own traditions, create new memories for Emma." I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair, the same chair where I'd paid his college bills, where I'd signed the mortgage papers, where I'd planned every Christmas for the past 42 years. "But I always host Christmas dinner," I said quietly. "It's our tradition. Emma loves helping me make cookies for Santa." "Things change, Mom. We need space to create our own family traditions. You understand, right? You've had your turn." Your turn. Like being a grandmother was a game with time limits. Like loving my family was something I'd been allowed to do temporarily and now my lease was up. "What about Christmas Eve?" I asked, grasping for something. Anything. "We always do Christmas Eve together. Emma's stocking." "We're doing Christmas Eve with Sarah's family, too. They're flying in from California." "I see." My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow and distant. And you didn't think to discuss this with me? To see if maybe I could join you or if we could work something out? Another pause. Mom, you're being dramatic. It's just 1 year. We'll see you sometime during the holidays. Sometime during the holidays. Like I was a distant relative they might squeeze in between real family obligations. Of course, I heard myself saying. I understand completely. Great. I knew you'd be cool about it. Listen, I have to run. Client meeting in 5 minutes. We'll talk soon, okay? The line went dead before I could respond. I sat in my kitchen for 3 hours after that call, staring at the Christmas decorations I'd already put up, at the presents I'd wrapped and hidden in the hall closet, at the grocery list I'd made for Christmas dinner. 42 years of Christmas mornings, of making magic for my family, dismissed with 7 words. We're not expecting you this year. But the truly devastating part wasn't what David said. It was how he said it. Casual, matter of fact, like my presence at Christmas was negotiable, like the woman who had given birth to him, raised him, sacrificed everything for him, was just an optional guest who could be uninvited without consequence. That night, I called my sister Linda in Phoenix. They uninvited you from Christmas. Linda's voice rose 3 octaves. Margaret, that boy has lost his mind. Maybe they just need space, I said, but even I didn't believe it anymore. Space? After everything you've done for them? Honey, you've been paying their mortgage for 3 years. It's just temporary help. It's been 3 years, and now they don't want you for Christmas. Margaret, when was the last time David called just to see how you were doing? I tried to remember. Tried to think of the last conversation we'd had that wasn't about Emma's schedule or whether I could pick up groceries for them or handle some errands Sarah didn't have time for. I can't remember. And when was the last time they invited you somewhere? Not asked you to babysit or help with something, but actually invited you to join them for fun? Again, silence. Margaret, honey, I love you, but you need to wake up. They're not treating you like family. They're treating you like hired help who happens to share DNA. I hung up angry at Linda for saying what I couldn't bear to hear, but her words echoed in my head all night, mixing with the memory of David's dismissive tone, with years of being taken for granted, with the slow realization that somewhere along the way, my love had become an obligation rather than a gift. Christmas Eve arrived gray and cold. I sat in my living room, looking at the tree I decorated by myself, surrounded by presents that would never be opened. My phone was silent. No calls from David wishing me Merry Christmas. No texts from Sarah. No FaceTime call so Emma could show me what Santa brought. Nothing. I drove past their house that evening, just once, and saw cars in the driveway. Sarah's parents' rental car, Helen's Mercedes, a house full of laughter and light and family that didn't include me. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of Emma in a red velvet dress I'd never seen before, opening presents surrounded by grandparents who lived 3,000 miles away, but somehow rated an invitation to Christmas when I didn't. Christmas morning was worse. The silence was deafening. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, looking at my phone and willing it to ring. By noon, I couldn't stand it anymore. I called David. "Oh, hey, Mom," he answered, distracted. I could hear Emma giggling in the background, could hear Sarah's mother exclaiming over some gift. "Sorry, it's crazy here. Can I call you back later?" "I just wanted to wish Emma a Merry Christmas," I said. "Could I talk to her for just a minute?" "She's kind of busy with her new toys right now. Hey, I really need to go. Thanks for calling." He hung up before I could say, "I love you." That's when I knew Linda was right. That's when the fog of self-deception finally lifted and I saw the truth that had been staring me in the face for years. I wasn't family anymore. I was a service provider. I was the woman they called when they needed money or babysitting or someone to handle the tasks they couldn't be bothered with. But when it came to joy, to celebration, to the moments that mattered, I was expendable, forgettable, uninvited. That afternoon, I went to my bedroom and opened the shoebox where I kept all my financial records. bank statements, canceled checks, receipts, the paper trail of 5 years of temporary help. I spread them across my bed and started calculating. Mortgage payments, $2,400 a month for 36 months, $8,400. Down payment assistance, $25,000. Utilities during their rough patches, $8,200. Car repairs, medical bills, Emma's clothes and toys, $12,600. The wedding flowers I'd secretly paid for, $3,800. Groceries for weekly family dinners, $6,400. Christmas and birthday gifts, $8,500. Emergency funds for various crises, $14,200. Total, $165,100. More than I'd ever made in 3 years combined. More than my house was worth. More than my retirement savings. I had given my son enough money to buy a house outright, and in return, I got uninvited from Christmas. But it wasn't really about the money. It was about what the money represented. It was about the fact that I had given everything. My time, my energy, my financial security, my future, and somehow, in David's mind, that made me less valuable, not more. It made me someone who could be dismissed, overlooked, taken for granted. I thought about my mother who died when David was 5. She'd been tough, practical, the kind of woman who believed in earning respect rather than simply expecting it. Margaret, she used to say, if you don't value yourself, don't expect anyone else to. I'd failed that test spectacularly. But sitting there, surrounded by the evidence of my own misplaced generosity, something shifted inside me. Something that had been sleeping for years suddenly woke up, stretched, and stood tall. I didn't have to accept this. I didn't have to smile and pretend it was okay to be treated like I was disposable. I didn't have to keep paying for the privilege of being ignored. I was 67 years old, but I wasn't dead yet. And it was time to remember what my mother had tried to teach me all those years ago. It was time to start valuing myself. The next morning, December 26th, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The numbers from the night before were still spread across my bed like evidence in a court case. And for the first time, I wasn't looking at them as a mother's love made tangible. I was looking at them as what they really were, a pattern of enabling that had to stop. I made coffee and sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd received that devastating phone call 3 days earlier. But something fundamental had shifted. The woman who had sat here, heartbroken and confused, was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood the difference between love and doormat. That's when I remembered the photo album. I'd been meaning to organize my pictures for years, and there it was, sitting on the shelf in my bedroom closet, thick with memories I hadn't looked at in far too long. I pulled it down and opened it to the first page. There was David at age 8, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a card he'd made for Mother's Day. In his careful second-grade handwriting, he'd written, "To the best mom ever, you are my hero. Love, David." Below that, a drawing of 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow labeled "Me and Mom." I turned the page. David, at 12, the day after his father's funeral, clinging to me like I was the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly become terrifyingly uncertain. He'd whispered into my shoulder that night, "Promise you'll never leave me, Mom. Promise you'll always be here." "Always, baby," I'd whispered back. "Always." Page after page of evidence that this boy had once loved me unconditionally. David at graduation, his arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming. David at his law school graduation, lifting me off my feet in a bear hug while tears streamed down both our faces. "I couldn't have done this without you, Mom," he'd said that day. "Everything I am, I owe to you." When had that gratitude turned into expectation? When had thank you become, of course you will? When had I stopped being his hero and started being his bank? I found the answer in the later photos. David with Sarah, looking at her the way he used to look at me, like she hung the moon and stars. David and Sarah at their engagement party, surrounded by her wealthy family looking like he belonged in their world. David holding Emma for the first time, his face filled with the kind of wonder I remembered from his own childhood. But I wasn't in many of those later pictures. Oh, I was there. I was the one taking them after all. But when I appeared in family photos, I was always slightly apart, slightly behind, like an afterthought who happened to be present when the camera clicked. The final photo broke something inside me. It was from Emma's 3rd birthday party last year. Sarah had hired a professional photographer, and every shot was magazine perfect. But there I was, in the corner of one frame, cleaning up spilled juice while the real family posed for pictures. Even in my granddaughter's birthday photos, I was relegated to the help. That's when it hit me like a thunderbolt. I had taught David to treat me this way. Every time I said yes when I should have said no. Every time I made his problems my problems. Every time I prioritized his comfort over my own dignity. Every time I accepted less respect because I was afraid of losing his love entirely. I had trained my own son to take me for granted. The realization was devastating and liberating at the same time. Devastating because it meant I bore responsibility for my own mistreatment. Liberating because it meant I had the power to change it. I closed the photo album and made a decision that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. I was done being taken for granted. Done being the emergency fund for people who couldn't be bothered to include me in their celebrations. Done sacrificing my dignity for the illusion of family harmony. If David wanted to treat me like I was disposable, then perhaps it was time for him to discover just how much he'd been depending on someone he clearly didn't value. I walked to my desk and pulled out the mortgage paperwork, the documents I'd signed 3 years ago when I foolishly believed that helping my son buy a house would bring us closer together. As co-owner of the property, I had certain rights I'd never exercised because I'd never imagined needing to protect myself from my own child. But David had made it clear that I wasn't really his family anymore. And if I wasn't family, then I certainly wasn't obligated to pay family expenses. The bank opened at 9 a.m. on December 27th. I was there at 8:55, dressed in my best suit, carrying a folder full of documents and a heart full of resolution that surprised me with its steadiness. Mrs. Thompson, the loan officer Jennifer Walsh, greeted me warmly. "How can we help you today?" "I need to discuss the automatic payment setup on the Morrison property," I said, using David's married name. "I'd like to discontinue my payments effective immediately." Jennifer's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, is there a problem with the account?" "No problem at all. I simply no longer wish to continue making payments on a property where I'm not welcome." It took an hour to complete the paperwork, but when I walked out of that bank, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time in 3 years, David Thompson would be responsible for his own mortgage payment. Due January 1st, just 5 days away. But stopping the mortgage payment was just the beginning. I spent the rest of that day on the phone with various utility companies, insurance providers, and service companies. The cell phone plan I'd been paying for David's family, canceled. The life insurance policy I'd maintained on both David and Sarah, with Emma as beneficiary, canceled. The family plan for roadside assistance, the streaming services, the emergency credit card I'd given them for real emergencies that somehow got used for dinner dates and shopping trips. All of it canceled. With each phone call, I felt more like myself again. Not David's mother, not Emma's babysitter, not Sarah's unpaid help. Just Margaret Thompson, a woman who deserved to be treated with respect and dignity. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove to the bookstore and bought 3 travel magazines. I'd always wanted to see Alaska, to take one of those scenic cruises through the Inside Passage. But every time I'd considered it, there had been some crisis with David's family that required my financial attention instead. Well, now I had an extra $2,400 a month to work with, plus whatever I'd been spending on their other expenses, probably another $800 or $900 monthly. Suddenly, Alaska didn't seem impossible at all. I spent that night researching cruise lines and planning an itinerary that would have seemed pure fantasy just a week ago. 7 days through the glaciers and fjords, with stops in Juneau and Ketchikan and Skagway. The cost was significant, but for the first time in years, I was spending money on my own happiness instead of someone else's mortgage. December 28th passed quietly. I heard nothing from David, which didn't surprise me. The mortgage payment wasn't due until January 1st, and David had probably never paid attention to when it was automatically deducted from my account. Why would he? It wasn't his problem. December 29th was the same. I spent the day at the community center signing up for a watercolor painting class that started in January. The instructor, a lovely woman named Patricia, was probably 15 years younger than me, but talked to me like an equal, like someone whose opinions mattered. "Have you painted before?" she asked. "Not since high school," I admitted. "I always meant to get back to it, but life got in the way." "Well, life's still happening," Patricia said with a smile. "Might as well make it beautiful." I liked her immediately. December 30th brought the first sign that my new reality was about to collide with David's assumptions. My phone rang at 2:17 p.m. David's number. I let it go to voicemail. The second call came at 4:33 p.m. Again, voicemail. The third call came at 7:45 p.m., just as I was settling in with a cup of tea and one of the travel books I'd bought. This time, I answered. "Hi, Mom." David's voice was strained, different from the casual dismissal I'd heard on Christmas Eve. "I need to ask you something. Did you change banks or something?" "No, honey. Same bank I've used for 20 years. Why?" "Well, it's weird. The mortgage payment didn't go through automatically today like it usually does. The bank called to remind us that it's due tomorrow." I took a sip of my tea, savoring both the warmth and the moment. "That is weird." "Yeah, so I was wondering if maybe there was some kind of error with your account, or maybe your card expired." "Oh no, there's no error. My account is fine." A pause. "So? The payment will go through tomorrow?" "No, David, it won't." Another pause. Longer this time. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I stopped the automatic payments. I'm no longer paying your mortgage." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, David's voice returned, tight with something between confusion and panic. "You stopped paying our mortgage? Why would you do that?" "Because it's not my mortgage, sweetheart. It's yours." "But Mom, you know we're counting on that payment. We can't afford—" "That's not my problem anymore." The words came out so calmly, so matter-of-factly, that they surprised even me. But they felt right. They felt like the truth I should have spoken years ago. "What do you mean that's not your problem? Of course it's your problem. You're my mother." "I'm your mother, David. I'm not your personal ATM." "This is crazy. You can't just stop paying our mortgage. We have Emma to think about." "You should have thought about Emma before you uninvited me from Christmas." Another long silence. When David spoke again, his voice had shifted into that lawyer tone he used when he was trying to win an argument through intimidation. "Mom, this is emotional blackmail. You can't hold our housing situation hostage because your feelings got hurt." My feelings got hurt, as if being dismissed and excluded and taken for granted was nothing more than a minor emotional bruise. "You're right," I said. "I can't hold your housing situation hostage. That's why I'm not holding it at all. It's entirely in your hands now, just like it should have been from the beginning." "But we can't make the payment, not by tomorrow." "Then I suggest you call the bank and work out a payment plan, or call Sarah's parents. I'm sure they'd be happy to help their daughter avoid foreclosure." "Sarah's parents don't know about— They don't know you've been helping us." "Oh, of course they didn't. Because asking for help from Sarah's wealthy family would be embarrassing, but taking money from his mother was just expected." "Well, then this might be a good time to tell them." "Mom, please, you're being unreasonable. It's one Christmas. We told you we'd see you sometime during the holidays." "When, David? When exactly were you planning to see me? New Year's Eve? Or were you planning to squeeze me in sometime in January between Sarah's yoga classes and Emma's playdates?" "You're being dramatic." "No, I'm being realistic. For the first time in years, I'm seeing our relationship clearly, and what I see is that I'm valued for what I provide, not for who I am." "That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time you called just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you invited me somewhere that wasn't about babysitting Emma or helping you with some problem? When was the last time you treated me like family instead of hired help?" Silence again. The fact that he couldn't answer immediately told me everything I needed to know. "I love you, David," I continued. "I will always love you, but I won't continue to enable you to treat me with disrespect. If you want a relationship with me, it needs to be based on mutual respect, not just what I can do for you. So you're just going to let us lose our house? I'm going to let you take responsibility for your own financial decisions. You're a successful lawyer, David. You and Sarah are intelligent, capable adults. You don't need your 67-year-old mother paying your bills. But we can't afford, then maybe you can't afford that house." The words hung between us like a blade. David was quiet for so long I thought he might have hung up. "I can't believe you're doing this," he finally said. "I can't believe it took me this long." After I hung up, my phone started ringing almost immediately, David calling back, probably to try a different approach. I turned the phone off and went to bed early, sleeping better than I had in months. January 1st dawned bright and clear. New Year's Day, new beginnings. My phone, when I finally turned it back on at 10 a.m., showed 17 missed calls, 15 from David, 2 from Sarah. The voicemails ranged from pleading to angry to desperate. "Mom, please call me back. We need to work this out. This is ridiculous. You can't just abandon your family. The bank is threatening foreclosure proceedings already. Please, Mom, Emma needs stability. Fine. You want to play hardball? Sarah's dad is flying in tomorrow to straighten this mess out." I deleted them all without a second thought. At 11:30, my phone rang again. This time, I answered. "Hello, David." "Mom, thank God. Look, I know we got off on the wrong foot yesterday. Actually, I think we got on the right foot for the first time in years. Sarah's father is flying in from California tomorrow. He wants to meet with you about the mortgage situation." "How nice. I'm not available." "Mom, you have to be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. I'm being more reasonable than I've been in 3 years. What do you want from us? Do you want an apology? Fine. I'm sorry we didn't invite you for Christmas. There. Can we move on now?" His idea of an apology was like a Band-Aid on a severed artery. Too little, too late, and fundamentally inadequate to address the real damage. It's not about Christmas, David. Christmas was just the moment I finally saw clearly what our relationship had become. Which is what? Transactional. I give, you take. I sacrifice, you benefit. I'm available when you need something, invisible when you don't. Now that's not fair. When was the last time you asked about my life, my health, my happiness? When was the last time you considered what I might want or need? Another silence. "I take care of Emma all the time," he finally said. "Taking care of Emma isn't doing me a favor, David. It's asking me to do you one. Everything in our relationship flows one direction, toward you. So what do you want? You want us to grovel? You want us to beg? I want you to grow up." The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I didn't regret them. I want you to take responsibility for your own life instead of expecting your mother to subsidize your lifestyle. I want you to understand that love isn't supposed to be one-sided, and I want you to figure out how to have a relationship with me that isn't based on what I can do for you. And if we can't make the mortgage payment, then you'll figure something out. Sell the house, move somewhere smaller, ask Sarah's parents for help, get a second job, do what millions of other adults do when they can't afford their lifestyle. You're really going to let us lose everything? I'm going to let you take control of your own life. There's a difference. That afternoon, I booked the Alaska cruise, 7 days in late June, a stateroom with a balcony, all meals included, the most expensive vacation I'd ever planned for myself. Then I called the community college and signed up for 2 classes, watercolor painting, and basic computer skills. I'd been intimidated by technology for too long, relying on David to help me with everything from my email to online banking. Time to become self-sufficient in every way. Finally, I called a realtor about getting my house appraised. Not because I was planning to sell, but because I wanted to understand my own financial position without the constant drain of supporting David's family. The numbers were eye-opening. My little house, the one I'd bought with Robert 30 years ago, was now worth almost $400,000. The mortgage was long paid off. Combined with my retirement savings and Social Security, I was actually quite comfortable, as long as I wasn't supporting 2 other households. For the first time in years, I felt financially secure. More than secure, I felt free. That evening, as I sat in my living room reading about glaciers and wildlife in Alaska, my phone rang one final time. It was Emma. Gamma? Her little voice was uncertain, confused. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, my heart melting despite everything. "How are you, baby girl?" "Mommy and Daddy are fighting about money," she whispered. "Daddy says you're not helping anymore. Are you mad at me?" The question broke my heart. Whatever issues I had with David and Sarah, Emma was innocent in all of this. "Oh, honey, no. I'm not mad at you at all. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Then why won't you help Daddy anymore?" How do you explain complex adult relationships to a 4-year-old? How do you tell a child that sometimes loving someone means stepping back and letting them learn to stand on their own? Sometimes, sweetheart, when people always have someone else solve their problems for them, they forget how to solve problems themselves. Your daddy is very smart and very capable, but he's forgotten that because Gamma has been helping with everything for so long. So you're helping him remember how to be smart? Out of the mouths of babes. Yes, baby girl. I'm helping him remember how to be smart. Okay, I love you, Gamma. I love you too, Emma. Always and forever. After she hung up, I sat in the quiet of my living room and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not the peace of avoidance or denial, but the peace that comes from finally being true to yourself. I had spent so many years defining myself through my relationship with David, measuring my worth by how much I could give, how much I could sacrifice, how much I could endure. But I was more than just David's mother. I was Margaret Thompson, a woman with her own dreams, her own value, her own right to respect and dignity. Tomorrow, David would figure out how to make his mortgage payment, or he wouldn't, and he'd face the consequences. Either way, it would be his choice, his responsibility, his life to manage. And for the first time in 3 years, I would be living my own life instead of funding someone else's. The woman who had sat in this same chair just a week ago, heartbroken and confused by her son's casual dismissal, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, clearer, more certain of her own worth. Someone who finally understood that the greatest gift you can give someone isn't money or sacrifice or endless enabling. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to stand on their own 2 feet, even if they don't thank you for it, especially then.